It was said without preambles, without more disguises, "You are the reason for living." It's not something that was imagined to be pronounced, but when expressed, it sounds like the only possible truth. The pride and fear that once seemed like unbeatable shields now dissolve in the face of a pure and inevitable confession. Total surrender leaves no more room for hesitation. What was once a game of caution and reservations now transforms. The dynamics, undoubtedly, have already changed. And regardless of what comes next, this truth remains. There is no turning back. All that is left is a vulnerability that redefines everything that was believed. It's impossible to continue pretending that nothing has changed, that things remain as they were before. The truth has been told, and once exposed, there is no turning back. The pride, the fear, the defenses, all that once seemed like an unbeatable shield, now dissolved in the face of a single realization. You are the reason for living. Something that was never imagined to be said, but that was there, waiting for the right moment to be exposed. And now that it has been said, there is no more room for indifference, for falsity. What remains is transparency, vulnerability, unreserved surrender. When pride finally falls, the impact is immeasurable. The distance that once seemed like a choice now sounds like a lie. The fear that hid behind empty words and calculated gestures was dissolved by the sincerity of a single phrase. It's no longer about hiding what is felt. There are no more justifications, excuses, or reasons for what has been denied for so long. What remains is a raw, naked truth. And this truth cannot be ignored. The delivery of something so deep and so true transforms everything. No matter how much fear tried to hold back, what matters now is what has been exposed. The defenses have been broken. The shield has been shattered. What was hidden, concealed, is now clear and evident. What once seemed to be just a facade is now a reality that cannot be dismissed. And what does this mean for what comes next? Is it possible to continue as before after something so profound has been said? Is it possible to deny its impact? Transformation does not happen without consequences. One cannot simply erase what has been revealed. Now every step, every word, carries the weight of this confession. The total surrender, the delivery of something so vital, changes the dynamics. What once seemed to be a game is now real. There is no more room for games. What matters is honesty. And even if the future is uncertain, the truth is now the foundation of everything. It doesn't matter what comes next. What was said cannot be erased. What has been exposed creates a new reality, a new way of seeing things, of living. And from this moment on, life will never be the same. There is no longer the possibility of returning to a state of indifference. What was said redefines everything. What was once a relationship of distances and barriers is now a relationship of transparency, of mutual surrender. What was once just a game now becomes something real. And perhaps that is frightening, but it is also necessary. Because in the end, the only thing that remains is the truth. And when this truth is exposed, nothing can be the same. Now what remains is to understand the implications of this change, how to deal with the new reality, how to move forward, knowing that nothing can be ignored anymore. Perhaps the future is not clear, perhaps it is full of uncertainties, but what matters is that after this revelation, nothing can be the same. What once seemed like a game of protection is now genuine surrender, an invitation to a new dynamic. And deep down, this is all that is needed to build something new, something real, something without masks. And no matter how uncertain the future is, the truth now is the foundation that cannot be ignored. It is difficult, perhaps even painful, to admit that there is no turning back. But this is what happens when the truth is finally told, when the surrender is total, when the barriers fall and what remains is a real bond. This changes everything. There is no turning back. There is nothing left to hide. Only what has been said remains, and in the end that is what really matters. Now the only way forward is to deal with the consequences of this truth. Because once it has been said, the dynamic transforms. It is no longer about pretending nothing happened. What happened changed everything. And what comes next, full of uncertainties though it may be, is the only thing that really matters. What was said, what was revealed, creates a new beginning. No matter how uncertain it is, What really matters is that the truth is now the foundation of everything, and with it, a new chapter begins. This moment is the end of something old and the beginning of something new. You can no longer go back to what was before. The change has already happened, and now it is necessary to understand how to deal with it. What was revealed, what was said, brings with it a new vision, and it is impossible to deny its impact. From here, the only thing that remains is what will be built with this new truth. It's strange because now that the truth has been told, everything seems clearer, but at the same time, heavier. As if the air had changed, but not in the sense of relief as one might expect. Something heavy was released, but with that, an empty space was also created. And this emptiness, this new weight, is difficult to handle, because by truly giving in, by exposing what you feel, the sensation left is not one of freedom, but a new kind of enslavement. Not in the literal sense, but something much deeper. Something that involves what is expected, what is needed, what is feared to be lost. Now this truth hangs in the air, and there is no way to ignore it. Some say that total surrender is liberating, and maybe in a perfect world it would be, but the truth, when exposed, does not come without consequences. It does not come without a feeling of vulnerability, of being completely naked before the other, as if, by showing everything, by revealing what was previously hidden, it was possible that the other might distance themselves. Because after something like this, such a raw confession, it becomes clear that you can no longer pretend that everything remains the same as before. You can no longer expect things to go back to normal for the defenses to stay the same. The only thing left now is this truth. And, no matter how much one wants to ignore it, no matter how much one tries to go back to how it was before, it's no use. It's not possible. This revelation changed everything. And it's not just about the immediate impact. It's not just about the words that were said, but about what they bring with them. The weight of expectations. The weight of knowing you are vulnerable, of having given everything without expecting anything in return. Because deep down, what was revealed is much more than simple words. It's the surrender of something that you never had the courage to show before, and now it lingers in the air, hovering between both parties. It is important to understand that from this moment on, what happens next cannot be controlled, because no matter how much you have given everything, no matter how honest you have been, the other person may not be on the same wavelength. The other person may not see things the same way. The other person may be afraid. And this fear, this uncertainty, is what makes everything even more complicated. Because when you give yourself, when you say what you feel, what you expect is for the response to come with the same intensity. But the response can be colder. The response can be more distant. And that is the true fear that comes after the confession. Because after opening up, after showing yourself without reservations, what will remain if the other person does not reciprocate? Of course, the fear of being rejected is something natural, but the reality is that after such a deep surrender, the doubt becomes more painful. What seemed to be a strong, secure relationship is now a constant uncertainty, because after the words are spoken, after the truth is exposed, what will remain will be the response, and this response can be painful, can be cold, can be something you never imagined. And this fear of not being reciprocated, of not receiving back what was given, is a constant sensation. It's difficult to accept that after giving so much, the other person may simply not feel the same. And what happens when that is the case? What do you do when the confession is not received as expected? What do you do when vulnerability is not recognized, when sincerity is ignored? These are the questions that arise when the truth is told. Because deep down, if the other person does not respond with the same intensity, with the same commitment, what remains is an emptiness. An emptiness of unmet expectations. Now the only thing left to do is wait. Wait to see how things unfold. Wait to see if the other person will reciprocate in the same way, if they will understand the magnitude of the offering. Because deep down, the lingering doubt isn't about what was said, but about what comes next. Will this be acknowledged? Will the other person feel the same need to open up, to show vulnerability? Or will the distance grow even more? Will the barriers return? Will indifference take the place of sincerity? And this weight, this sensation of being at the mercy of whatever the other will do with the truth that was revealed, is something that gnaws away slowly. It's not something that resolves immediately. It's not something you can control, because the only thing known for sure now is what was said. And this certainty is both liberating and confining, because on the one hand, there's nothing more to hide. But on the other hand, there's now the weight of knowing that the other person may or may not react in the same way. What happens after the confession is something unpredictable. It may be that the response comes with the same intensity. It may be that the other person opens up in the same way. But it may also be that the response is cold, distant, creating more separation than connection. And this uncertainty is what makes everything even harder to handle. Because now that the truth has been told, the only thing that can be done is wait. And waiting has never been easy, especially when what is being waited for is something so vulnerable, something so sincere. In the end, it is this vulnerability that really changes everything. Because by truly opening up, by showing who one really is, there is a feeling of being completely exposed. And at that moment, it no longer matters how much one tried to control, how much one tried to keep the defenses up. The only thing that matters is what was said, what was revealed. And now, the only thing that can be done is wait to see what the other will do with it. Now it's impossible to go back. What was said can no longer be taken back. The only thing left is to live with the weight of the truth, with the weight of exposure. Because no matter how much one wants to move forward, no matter how much one wants to forget what happened, there is no way to ignore its impact. The only thing that remains now is to understand what to do with this new weight, and maybe the only way is to wait and see what comes next. Uncertainty persists. What was said, no matter how sincere it was, now carries a weight that is difficult to bear. The self-revelation, no matter how necessary it was, creates a void that cannot be ignored. The silence of the response, or its absence, weighs as much as the revelation. One cannot control what comes next, and that is what is frightening. The exposed vulnerability, what one has now, is an expectation that the other, upon receiving what was said, will do the same. But what if that doesn't happen? What if the other doesn't reciprocate? By opening up in this way, one hopes that reciprocity will be natural, that the other will also open up, reveal themselves in the same way. But at the same time, there is the fear that the distance will increase, that the other will protect themselves and not reciprocate the vulnerability. The biggest fear now is not what was said, but what comes next. What to do when the response doesn't come. How to cope with the fear that, by being exposed, the other will distance themselves. That is the biggest question. How to live with the uncertainty that comes after the confession. How to accept that the truth, no matter how strong it was, may not be enough to change the dynamic between the two people. What is hoped for is that vulnerability will be met with sincerity. But what if the response isn't that? The waiting becomes excruciating. The only thing that exists now is the weight of the confession. The delivery was made, but the response is still pending. And that is what makes everything harder, not knowing what the other person feels, not knowing if what was said was truly heard. What is hoped for is reciprocity, but the uncertainty of the response is painful. This is the real challenge of vulnerability, not knowing what will come next. What is done now is wait. And this weight, this insecurity, is what weighs heavily. The weight in the end is the real test, not only because of the uncertainty of what will come, but because of the feeling that, by opening up wholeheartedly, there is something immense at stake, something that cannot be predicted, something that cannot be controlled. And this, no matter how much one tries to rationalize, is the hardest part, because it's no longer just a simple exchange of words. Something profound was shared, something that goes beyond the surface, and deep down what is hoped for is that the other person sees that they recognize the courage to expose oneself in this manner, to say what has been kept inside for so long, to allow the other person to have the key to access a part of oneself that was previously only behind walls. But the big question is, will the other person be willing to open that door as well? Or will they let silence prevail? And this is the lingering fear, the silence, the void, the feeling that vulnerability will not be seen, that everything laid out on the table will be ignored. The need to be recognized and accepted becomes even more urgent, but at the same time, The fear that this recognition will never come, that the weight of the truth will not be shared, is what paralyzes. Because deep down, by opening up, by saying everything that was never had the courage to be said, what is hoped for is that the other person will also open up. That it will not just be a one-sided confession, but a genuine, true exchange. But what if that doesn't happen? What if instead of openness, what you receive is just more distance? What do you do when you offer everything you have, and the response is nowhere near what you expected? This is the dilemma. The doubt that lingers in the air, the anguish that doesn't dissipate. The fear that, by choosing to expose yourself, the response will be an even greater distance. The fear that by trying to break down the barriers, they rise even higher. Maybe that's why deep down we remain waiting. Waiting for the other person to react, waiting for the response to come, waiting for the vulnerability to be reciprocated. And while this waiting lasts, there is a constant feeling of anxiety, of not knowing if the effort was in vain, if what was said will have any impact, or if it will dissipate into the void. What remains then is uncertainty. And this is a difficult truth to bear, because no matter how much you have given, the response from the other person might not be what you expected. And in a way, that changes everything. So in the end, the only thing you can do is wait. And in waiting, it's not just time that passes. What's happening is a reflection on what was exposed and what still needs to be learned about yourself in this process. This vulnerability, this surrender, brings to light not only what others do with it, but also what it reveals about your own courage. What it reveals about what you are capable of giving, even when you are not sure what you will receive in return. So if you have come this far, you understand the depth of this surrender and the pain of waiting for something that might not come. If what was exposed made you reflect on your own vulnerability and what it means to truly open up, tell me in the comments. Have you ever gone through something like this? How do you deal with uncertainty after a genuine confession? Do you believe it is possible to give yourself without fear of what the other will do with it? Share your thoughts, and if this content touched you in any way, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. Every time you subscribe, something transforms. Not only will the content reach you more directly, but also the chance to reflect more on life, feelings, and the experiences we all share. Comment, like, and subscribe. Let's go together on this journey of understanding more about what it means to be vulnerable and how vulnerability shapes our relationships.